amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming by and playing. So there are a few different things. There are the things you're known for, and then there are a few things that I saw just in this solo right here that inspired me to ask a few things. But I've been thinking about this a lot, actually, because I have been working on a bunch of different ways to slice and dice improvisation myself. Like just like you have a space to fill, maybe it's in time, maybe it's out of time. What are the tools at your disposal to create interest? And yeah, why for you do you gravitate toward ostinatos? Why are ostinatos important?
So to me, one thing was I wanted to create a method where I would practice as efficiently as possible and work on as many things at once. In particular, the feet. So foot technique has always been, especially coming from a metal background, you had to have good double bass technique. My singles just have never been that good. And so I worked on doubles a lot, which then led to me, and when I was in 11th grade, I started studying with Jason Gianni at the Collective, at Drummers Collective, and he was really big into a lot of independent stuff, left foot clave, etc. And that really got me started. Then during college, I started working out of the Marco Miniman and Thomas Lang and Virgil Donati books. So it took me 7 years, but I finished the Marco and Thomas and Virgil books. And after I'd finished them, I decided it was time to create, to go a little further and create something more. So really what I came up with was this idea of improvisation using these phrases, not just as select patterns, but the ability to switch them between limb sets and really create with them. So this is a language to me. The same way that that jazz comping and soloing is a language. This type of stuff is a language, it just hasn't been spoken that much or for that long. So I think there's so much potential here, it just takes a long time to kind of unlock it brain-wise. Now, granted, I got a little bit of a jump in that 9 months ago, but this type of stuff, and one of my biggest things was the books that, and this will be in my third book, the books that I worked out of, and then even my earlier material, I didn't feel comfortable just switching it up on the fly, switching limb combinations on the fly, putting triplets against things, putting quintuplets against things. That was the last thing at the end, was a double paradiddle on the left side and a quintuplet in the right side. I could do the same thing, reversing them, stuff like that. Yeah, and even with the hi-hat slipping, like still being able to improvise like you're just speaking with your hands or with relatively simple solos. So for me, that was a big part of practicing. And I know a lot of people, my foot technique has kind of been the thing that a lot of people talk about as kind of being boundary pushing. But being honest, I didn't really work on the feet that much alone. I just was playing a lot, and I was working on these exercises for just hours and hours, and that's how the foot technique developed a lot. It wasn't really a conscious, like, I'm going to sit here and run rudiments for 2.5 hours. It was like, okay, I'm going to work on this layered phrase for 2.5 hours, and that layered phrase just happens to have doubles in the feet, or happens to have singles in the feet, or another rudiment. Yeah. So that kind of got the foot technique happening there.
Interesting. Do you feel like you could demonstrate taking one of those things, one of the patterns that you learned out of one of the books maybe, or that was inspired by the stuff you learned out of the books, that originally was meant to be kind of a per se exercise, but then you developed into an ostinato that you can play stuff against?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that they had in that book was, and especially the Marco books, had a lot of this stuff of kind of these basic flam patterns. Then what you would could do is you could take that and modulate it into polyrhythms on this side. A little sloppy on that side, but stuff like that you could work on. Then I would take it into the other side. Etc. like that.
And the stuff from the Marco book probably was originally intended just as kind of body twisters to develop the dexterity to do the stuff that you might need playing in metal or prog. But because you were learning it already, you saw the opportunity to do the things with the other limbs.
Exactly, and that would be why, you know, again, I would spend a lot of time working, let's say, one set of limbs and another set, you really working different sets. So like doing flam tap, the flam taps in the hands. Then doing something in the feet. Left side. Etc. So that was, you know, a much more advanced way of working on that stuff, rather than just kind of playing it as patterns per se that were just sort of, as you said, body twisters or limb twisters.
Right. But I'm always fascinated about what about somebody's background and their tastes pushes them in a certain direction. So there are sort of two parts to this one. What do you think about who you listened to, what your tastes were, your makeup pushed you toward improvising against the ostinatos rather than just using them as they were intended, and then the sort of non-quantized related rates where you have like a 5 rubbing against an 8. Can you point to anything in like your background or the music you came up playing or listening to that pushed you in those directions?
Well, I was a metal kid. You know, I've always been a metalhead. That was my background. So when I was growing up, it was Meshuggah, Morbid Angel, Suffocation, Deicide, Dimmu Borgir with Nick Barker was huge for me, because I feel like that was when he made metal pop. It was just, he had this groove when he played metal. It almost sounded like hip hop. It had this like almost funky feel to it. And that was something that really stuck with me, was that you could take this technical music but make it feel so good. And so that was really big for me. And then my all-time hero, who I listened to all the time as a kid, was Virgil Donati. And I remember at a clinic seeing him do his, this was one of his signature things. It was a double paradiddle in the left side, and the paradiddle on the right. And that really made an impression on me. But one thing was, I thought that a lot of people were, and you know, Virgil at the time was doing more, he was starting to stretch out with that stuff a little more. He was doing some more of the cross stuff, but that stuff still was very rudimentary in its development, simply because it was so complex. And to me, I saw Virgil do it, and I was like, I want to do that, but it took a while. And when I remember seeing a lot of like what Marco was doing and what Virgil was doing. It was a lot of more even rates, and it was really only after 9 months ago when I had this seizure and they found this brain tumor that I was able to tap into the non-quantized rates. And that was fascinating to me, and it has been fascinating all year because I was never able to do those rates through multiple limbs the way I can right now.
Oh, interesting. Oh, wow.
That's the reason why it seems like people are fascinated by it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
that's a really, really interesting part of your story.
it threw a wrench in it threw. There was a silver lining. I mean, I would not want anybody to be part of this club, but the silver lining in some way was that I woke up the next day, put on 2 metronomes, and I could play 2 tempos at the same time. Couldn't do that before. And then I was able to take rhythms and put them into limb combinations on a level of ease I had like never done before. And really experiment and move out. You know, for example, like one of the ones I would do would be, for the longest time, my X. So I call them X patterns. They'd be left hand, right foot, or right hand, left foot. So like that type of stuff, singles. Doubles. Paradiddles. So suddenly I could change between this, then go into like triplets with like paradiddle. Those are paradiddles and paradiddle diddles. So then do double paradiddles. And then combine them all, like. And suddenly you had this like orchestrated phrase and like real interplay. So I called it like Alex Jazz, because what I was doing was trying to fill in the improv with the left foot. So like the swing pattern, if you had like. Make a groove like that.
Yeah. So the brain tumor made you able to hear the sort of unrelated rates at the same time. But was there a taste impetus too? Like, did you feel a pull toward things that were more sort of organic and less sort of boxed in?
Yes. Funny enough, the third book that I just am basically wrapping up, it was originally intended to be very similar to the stuff that I did on Drumeo that Ramon and I did. It's very quantized, very tech. And after this, they did the brain surgery to get this thing out of my head because it had to go. A malignant tumor has to go. So they got it out of my head, and I spent 2 weeks in this hotel room recovering from a surgery like that. And a surgery like that, your brain is traumatized.
Yeah.
I mean, you're on the verge of death for 2 weeks. And during that time, I became really attached to Art Tatum, Martha Argerich, Glenn Gould, a lot of classical pianists. And especially Art Tatum, because I loved how he could do the parallel lines and multiple lines, and that just became my like fascination at the time. And I really wanted to try and emulate that on the drums, be it through doing 2 parallel rates, like let's say septuplets on this side. hits at the same time like that, and then combining those where I could switch between them, and this was the thing that I never thought I'd be able to do. Being able to. So it creates these two separate rates happening at once. Then you would take that and try and put it into multiple limbs. So if you had in the hands.
Okay, so I think I clocked part of what was happening. So you had 3 per hand, and we'll talk about the feet in a second.
The feet were going between quintuplets and 8 notes and 16ths.
I see. But then it also looks like while keeping the same shape between the hands, i.e. 3 on each hand, you downshifted rates from 8, 7, 6, 5 or whatever. So it had this sense of like slowing down against the pulse.
Parallel lines, very similar to what I found a lot of the great classical pianists could do with one hand, where they could kind of create a rubato sound. And then with the other hand, chordal, keep it going like that. So I wanted to try and do that on drums.
Yeah.
And replicate that sound.
Do you feel like your brain attaches to rubato more easily if you relate it to a rate in
Yes.
time? I've kind of felt the same way. Like, I don't know if that's a innately human thing or maybe it's a drum thing or something like that. I was actually talking to a student about this the other day because I have some exercises that are just kind of like flow exercises to sort of just get people like doing singles and doubles around the toms and feeling like they can move any direction around the kit. And I was saying like, oh, it doesn't seem like you're switching. It doesn't seem like you're using very much rubato. Like it all seems like very kind of one rate. And he was like, yeah, to be honest, like my brain just doesn't really feel like it knows how to upshift or downshift. And I realized like, oh yeah, we haven't really worked on rate changing like in solos. Like we haven't practiced going from sextuplets to sixteenths to triplets. So I think that's a thing. I think it's a thing that at some level, and maybe it's because of if you're exposed to enough rhythm or something, you can't not relate everything back to a rate.
I think that that's the case. I also think that there's a certain way of thinking, and for me, I could really tap into it where I was thinking about multiple rates and multiple slowdowns or multiple kind of variations. I'd started it before. I had really started getting into it in the past 2 years, but which is funny because that corresponded when I started having symptoms of this brain tumor, weirdly enough, was when I started really getting into that. And then 9 months ago, suddenly I was really able to tap into this in a way that like I never thought I'd be able to. So one of the ways that I started, I do think of like, let's set a set pulse and a rate. So for example, let's say this will be the set pulse 3 in this foot, like 4, just grouping to 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1. Okay, so now we'll do like a 5 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now what we're going to do is then do septuplets on this side. I'm going to improvise with a 5.
So your left hand is thinking in a matrix of quintuplets against the pulse of the left foot.
Yes.
And then the right between the
the cymbal and the floor tom. Now, if we really wanted to expand on that, what we could do is make the bass drum into an improvisatory element. So we could just, I call it the drift, and it's just kind of where one limb just goes off. It was meant to simulate. It was meant to simulate being in a hospital room and just being. Your brain is hallucinating, basically. So the idea is that the limbs drift in and outside. So we could do the bass drum like that, and this is what I call four-way planar thinking, or you could just call three-way if you're doing three-way improv. But you could start to add left foot. But for right now, we'll keep it like this. So put this on top of.
I can kind of hear it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the right hand and right foot, they sound like they're almost playing sixteenths to your hi-hat pulse, but like a little bit slower because
exactly because the septuplets, and then the right foot is kind of drifting in and out. Like if you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. It goes against the 7. Yeah. So it creates this like borderline chaos, but then you want it to slam right back in. Like I could bring it right back in, like if you. So you hear it as like coming together like that.
So I have this on the brain because I saw Ari Honig last night. I've been a fan of his.
I studied with him in college. I studied with Ari, yeah. So. Yeah,
I've been a fan of his for decades, but it had been years since I'd seen a live gig. So anyway, I had JP Bouvet and one of his coaches were like in the audience, just like jaws on the floor, and. Yeah, one thing that struck me was like he uses a lot of this related rate stuff, although maybe not quite to the level of development that you do, but everything kind of answers to an outsider aesthetic, which is to say like the performance never crosses over into you have to be super steeped in exactly what's going on to get it, for it to move you musically. And I remember I was in like 2010, I talked to VJ Iyer, who's like who's still one of my heroes, but was just sort of coming up at the time, and he expressed a similar sentiment, i.e. that okay, well, music nerds can look at this stuff and like, oh yeah, like historicity, like it seems like it's slowing down, but it's metric. But like if it doesn't move a lay audience member, then I need to keep tinkering. And that's something I struggle with a little bit too, because I think there are two forces in conflict. So one is like the musicians are always going to be a little ahead of the public taste, right? In his own time, everybody thought Charlie Parker was like unmusical, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that there is a difference between technicality for technicality's sake and technicality that answers to some kind of emotional expression you're trying to create. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about how to
Yeah,
those.
I actually do. So one of the things that I wanted to do was use this stuff to create A, melodies, but B, also to have a groove in a song foundation to replicate percussion parts, to create a double drummer effect is what I call it. So like if you had like let me put a 3 here.
So it sounds like a drum trip. It sounds like two people playing.
Exactly. So the idea was that you could simulate like a percussion section, especially with this open closed hi-hat stuff. That's been stuff I've been working. Same with just more advanced like. that can create some really interesting percussive and groove ideas. And then same thing with doing melodic tom stuff, more like that. So it really creates like a musical context. The other thing that I really liked was a lot of what I was seeing were based off of guys like, and started by guys like Dana Hawkins and others, was this pseudo open-handed playing, which was like, it had a lot of this like, and then so my whole idea was like, well, let's make that a little more advanced. So if you had like, you can find that type of stuff. And that was really like a fascination of mine, was getting that ambidextrous pseudo, well, for me it was very much open-handed playing, because I was teaching myself how to really play open-handed and then open up with the right side. And really create with that.
Yeah, I think being able to keep an ostinato going with one hand while having full access to the kit with the other
huge
is pretty important. And I mean, unless you're going to do like remote hats, or I guess you could do it on a stack or something like that. The other thing is, I feel like a lot of drummers get led into open hand playing just by their absolute being over their left hand not being as good as their right, or their following hand not being as good as their lead hand, right?
Right here. My left hand has always been garbo, and so that was a big part of it, was I got bored. And you know, that was another thing, a big part of it as well, was playing open-handed. I advise students, my students, a lot of them, to switch the kit around fully lefty and play, like, let's say you're going like, and then really open that left side up and that foot phrasing up. Still trips me up at times too, because, you know, really improving with that stuff is quite difficult.
Yeah, it's
switching between left and right hand kits.
Of course. I actually have a student who's working on that, and he's pretty good. Shout outs Brian. He's committing to playing open-handed, so we're doing some breakbeat stuff. And
man after my own heart here.
Yeah.
Very nice. But yeah, this can be a way. Really trying to play those displacements and a lot of those ideas fully left. And then keeping that as like the bass drum as a quarter note, or interacting with the bass drum the way you would if you were playing jazz. You would do.
I know what you mean by fake open-handed too, because I feel like the shortcut to this for me will be tricking my brain into thinking that it's still right-hand lead while it has the affect of left-hand lead.
Exactly, and that to me is you want it, if you're going to do open-handed, you want to be open-handed for me.
Right.
I'm a big believer, because I can't do ostinatos and stuff like that with my left side without having full command of my right. And the easiest way for me, I thought, to do that would be to play open-handed.
When you say you can't do the ostinatos without having full command of your right, you mean just musically, like it's frustrating if you can't do everything you want to do with it? I see.
Yeah, it's, if you're stuck with only a select, like 2 or 3 licks to play on one side of your body against, that's not a musical tool, it's a party trick.
Yeah.
And that is why, to me, this is a language, but it's important to speak it and develop the syllables to create sentences. And that's why a lot of it for me came from really studying open-handed playing, because that was how I could get, a lot of this stuff going in the left hand, especially if you want to move between surfaces. And really then have your left hand be interactive that way. And again, most people that do this stuff need a big kit to feel comfortable with it. Yeah, it's like, a 4-piece with 2 cymbals, so it feels a little restrictive sometimes to me, but at the same time, if you, I taught myself how to do a lot of this stuff on small kits so I could get the most out of texture, dynamic, a lot of the stuff that you see guys like Nate Wood or Dan Weiss or Ari or a lot of those guys, I was going to see those guys play when I was in college, and so a lot of that was incorporated. And that was another thing that I noticed the Marco, the Thomas, those books really didn't incorporate, was that type of texture, timbre, and more of the phrasing that I was seeing a lot of these modern, a lot of modern jazz guys were doing. So really also expanding it from just these kind of blocks or these phrases that were just meant as exercises to actually creating let's see what it would sound like if you did a Nate Wood pattern against something in the left side.
Yeah, I was thinking about this last night when I was talking to JP's friend and coach, Dylan.
Oh yeah, Dylan.
Oh, you know that guy? Okay.
Yeah, Dylan.
Oh, because you filmed with him, right?
Yeah, he took a lesson from me, actually.
Cool. Yeah, super nice guy. Yeah. And I was asking him what do you usually like to play? And he's like, I usually like prog stuff. I do a bunch of prog. But then he'd also studied jazz, and I've been thinking about this for a while, but I think for this current generation of drummers coming up, the boundary between jazz and non-jazz is disappearing. Even when I was studying, there was kind of a bright line between it.
Same here. I mean, back then it was you were jive if you didn't or conform to a specific mold of jazz, and now that mold is gone. And jazz is so opened up as far, the boundary of prog in jazz has changed, the boundary of hip hop in jazz. A lot of modern jazz language is hip hop, basically. You hear a lot of the newer modern jazz guys, and you're hearing a lot of the Chris Day vocabulary and a lot of Eric Harland and Kendrick Scott. That to me is what I hear more of now, in a lot of Broken Time and a lot of when I hear a lot of those people play. Same thing listening to Mark Juliana combine kind of the breakbeat. Nate Wood did it too, kind of combine the breakbeat and more of the electronic music influences. That completely shifted the goalposts, I feel. And then you had guys like JP, like Matt Garska, like guys like that that were doing kind of the metal thing, but also came out of the fusion background, came from Berkeley. So that helped break the barrier. And then to me, the biggest contributors as of late that I've found, and I think that they all have had a big impact currently, are Justin Scott being one, Andy Prado Jr. being another, and Mason being a third. I think those three, I hear a lot of younger guys influenced by them.
Yeah, love all three of those guys.
Yeah.
Love what Andy's doing. Love what Mason's doing. And when I first met Mason, it was 2016 at NAMM. There was a whole bunch of drummers in town for NAMM, and Forrest Rice, Andy, and Mason completely just embraced me, even though I had no business hanging with those guys. But
they're good people.
Yeah, they're super nice and humble and inclusive. And I remember I was talking to Mason, and he said at the time his favorite drummer was Nate Wood, and I was like, well, I saw that shed with you and Tariq. Aren't you a gospel chops guy? And he's like, no, that chapter's over, and that generation's sort of seamless integration of the kind of Zach Danziger, Keith Carlock, Juliana, Nate Wood side of things, JD Beck with the gospel, Eric Moore, Chris Coleman, into sort of this seamless fusion, and then it feeds back on itself too. Because,
it does, because it's been in. So one of the things that I cite Justin for is he developed this practice chain video, this whole lesson series that he did, and the thing is, all these younger guys that I would talk to were working on his practice chain. So that practice chain and the phrasing of it really impacted a lot of the younger generation. At the same time, you had a lot of these guys were coming into prominence on Instagram. You had guys like Andy, and their vocabulary fundamentally, because to me, someone like an Andy or a Mason or one of them, they completely changed the game as far as what I thought was possible in terms of phrasing, the speed they can play it at, the power they can play it at, and how they have a command of time to end the phrases, begin the phrases. It's much more than just like 4 bars, which was again back when I first heard when I was at Berkeley 5 Week in like 2005. That's usually the way I describe it, was a lot of those gospel chops were just glorified quads.
Right.
Because it was very much in its infancy as far as development, and now seeing where it's gone has been amazing. And seeing guys like Mason, Andy, Justin Scott, other people, newer guys like Isaiah Weatherspoon, Breed X, and then obviously people like Dana, a lot of the Baltimore guys, Willie Howell, those just fantastic players that have really taken this and done remarkable things with it. And I just love checking out a lot of the new people because so many of them are so musical with it, and I think that's the goal ultimately is, you can be the fastest dude out there, but doesn't sound good. Is it musical? And I would say, like, when I hear someone like Dana or like Andy play, I'm just like, man, that sounds good, and like playing awesome stuff, but man, is it like I can just listen to that.
Yeah, I've also been mildly obsessed with like what makes somebody good, like what makes art good and what makes drumming good. And it's one of those things where like it's completely subjective, but you also know it when you see it.
100%.
So if I see Andy play, like I know what that is, and if I see Ari play, I recognize it too. And one thing that popped in my head when I was watching Ari last night is like, it doesn't really matter what direction you go, but there's no faking putting in the reps.
No.
It's like Michelin star cooking. Like if you're gonna serve me some Kraft salad dressing, like in this day and age, like everybody knows whether it's been fucked with and iterated or if it's just some bullshit, right?
I completely, and that's the thing, when I see any of those guys, I can hear the hours they put in, the time they've spent honing their hands, their alternations, just all of it. You hear someone like Justin or that whole crew, they're so clean when they do it. There's so much purpose behind what they do, and it flows, especially Justin, flows so well. And it flows so well because he's just got that stuff just dialed in, and in a way where it's just he expresses it. And I feel the same way when I listen to anybody that has such a command of the vocabulary. But funny enough, that's a lot of the stuff that I was checking out and trying to incorporate with this stuff. And so, I would send Andy back and forth like all these videos, just be like, check it out, man. Just trying to do, or, with Mason, I started adopting a lot more the 3 and the 1 foot. But then I did it in the left foot too, but that was a lot of being inspired by them and listening to them and trying to incorporate that language, because to me, I always thought like, this stuff it's cool, but it sounds really jive unless you put in that extra oomph to it that I believe really elevates it to a distinct language that is really I think worth checking out. And to me, that was kind of especially after 9 months ago, after the brain tumor, that really clicked with me, and I really wanted to make that part of my routine and kind of general MO when it came to practicing and working on this stuff.
Yeah, it's a bit of a paradox though, and I made a video about this last year because it's especially seeing it through students' eyes and seeing it through the eyes of students who were suffering because they weren't as good as they wanted to be, and even some people who had like shame and stage fright and just were afraid to like be themselves and express themselves. And yeah, I made this video where like there's two versions of me, one that's shirtless and one wearing a shirt, and the idea is like there's this paradox between like the Goggins thing, like nobody's gonna cry for you, you just have to put in the reps, like it's hard fucking knocks, I don't know what to tell you. But then on the other side, having to hollow out a space where you can feel completely comfortable showcasing all of your flaws. Yeah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, man, there's a reason why I do the videos on social media that I do, and the truth is it's a lot of stuff I just come up with and I'm like, yeah, here it is. You know, it's not perfect yet. I mean, nobody is it. Justin Scott too, Andy, I mean, they're all like, you know, a lot of this stuff, it's, you know, there's things that I want to work and get better. I think that's what I encourage my students to do, but it's also what I encourage myself to do, because I think the flaws are what make us human, and if you're completely non-flawed, well then just you're a drum machine, and cool, but to me that, you know, what makes it great is the human element. So for me, if I, you know, like earlier today I was like, I didn't like get that 100% or something like that, I would just say, okay, well, A, that's something I should work on more, is being more comfortable with that, so you come to realize things that you want to work on, and B, a lot of the time that's how you get the best feedback, and you figure out by listening to yourself how to tighten up, how to see your body mechanics, how they can get better. There's so many things you get from embracing the flaws, and by embracing them, working on them and trying to fix them.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest difference between your vantage point, having put in a certain number of thousands of hours, versus a student who's on the near side of that? Like, maybe a way to phrase it would be, what do you know from having done that journey, or having done part of that journey, of course we're all still on the journey, that you wish you had known at the beginning?
Don't. But what I would tell them is that I was able to develop this stuff by a lot of pitfalls and a lot of mistakes and a lot of wrong priorities, and it was developed because I think I wanted to eliminate a lot of my mistakes and the issues that I had learning this and kind of applying it. And therefore, I always tell them, if you do this, I guarantee you, you'll reach this area a lot faster than I did. Because I think that the methodology will get you there faster. But that being said, still a lot of work. Granted, now I would hope this student does it without a brain tumor. That's the variable that got thrown in.
Yeah.
That was the little kind. That was where things started to get blurry, was because I've legitimately told people I do not know how to teach some of this stuff.
Yeah, you don't have a control. You don't know what it would have been in the other, in the counterfactual.
It's literally, you know, there's just, if I didn't have the seizure, if I didn't have the brain tumor, if I didn't spend that time, like, what would I sound like? And my theory is that it would have sounded much more stale, and it wouldn't have had, I think, I wouldn't have been. There's so many things I think I thought were jokes or simply theoretical that suddenly I was able to do.
Sure. So you mentioned the methodology, and yeah, I think I have a thing that I do with students, which hopefully helps them accelerate their growth. Obviously, JP does. But yeah, what would you say is unique about your methodology? So
I go through each limb combination. So I'm a big proponent that by going through each limb combination, so most drummers, we think of it as top-bottom, bottom-up, right? So to me, and this is where Marco and Thomas really got onto something, that's not the case. Drums to me are an asterisk. You've got bottom-top, top, bottom, left, right, right, left, then the diagonals. These are the hardest. Right, left, right. So you have the ability, you want to have the ability to have control of your limbs on that level. Yes, it's miserable to practice that way sometimes, but the idea being that by getting control of your limbs that way, you embrace the instrument as a much more holistic view and comprehensive approach. So to me, it's the most comprehensive way of developing every limb, getting your time better, getting your articulation better, getting your chops better, and you're just going to find every facet of your playing improves. And you know, a lot of pros have tried this stuff, and they've all said it's been it's really helped them a lot.
Interesting you should bring that up. Yeah, like if you were to think about your bog standard student, in what stage of their development are they in, and what do they want to be able to do that they can't do or can't do yet?
So for me, it really depends. A lot of the students that I teach, so it's a lot of pros and a lot of advanced ones, but the kids that I do teach who are fantastic are all very, I'm not teaching a guitar center and just getting parents who want a babysitter. They're all very dedicated and really want careers, and they're doing really well, and it's great to see. And I hope they absolutely surpass me, because, you know, to give the line that Dan Weiss gave me when I was in college, if you sound like me, I have failed as a teacher, and if you have not surpassed me, I have failed as a teacher. So I hope my students take this further than me and go further than me.
That's a big one, and I feel like, actually, speaking of Justin Scott, that's something he imparted to a bigger degree than I've thought about it before, is the idea that our job as teachers isn't to create clones of ourselves.
Exactly. And you want them to clone, you want the student, and granted, I'm a firm believer that at some point, and because I was this way when you were younger, developing drummer, you have that clone phase where you're learning all this stuff from different drummers, be it Mark Juliana, Nate Wood, you know, you're learning that stuff, but as you develop your own distinct voice, then I believe the students that do that, they're the ones that are really going to take the language further.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you square having sort of a methodology with using that as a tool for students to develop their individual voices rather than just conform?
So a big part of it is I have a select listening kind of tool as well, where I give students a lot of people that I want them to check out and listen to, who I think, be it modern people or, you know, traditional drummers, obviously the classic jazz, but now a lot of these modern guys. And my whole thing is I want my students to listen to that and see if they can incorporate it into the stuff that we're learning and try and come back to me with their rendition of what I taught them, or if they have ideas, I want to see that. And when some people say, I want to send a student to you, I'm like, no, if you want them to learn my stuff, I want to see your take on it, not mine.
Right. So, random one, you were mentioning the triples and quadruples in the feet. Do you have a unique approach to that? When I was looking at your left foot, it doesn't look like you're sliding or heel toning.
Nope.
Maybe I'll grab the iPhone here and film your feet.
Totally. So I do have, my approach is quite different. Now, what I found out, now the slide thing, it's too much movement. The movement slows you down.
Agree.
So the way that I do it is so it's front of the foot, whole foot. That. Literally, it's just eliminating the slide. Same thing, left foot. And those are. Then, when it comes to the three, what I'll do is I'll do the same technique. The foot moves into position with the heel on the ground, and I'll do a heel down stroke to pull it up.
It's almost similar to how you close the hand when you're playing the ride cymbal.
Precisely.
So it's, you could almost think about like molar only with the foot.
Exactly. It's Yoni Madar is really good. You know, Yoni, Ramon Montagnier, myself, like we shared a lot of info there. That we're friends, and I took a lot from them technically. Same with Riccardo Merlini. I think Riccardo's technique right now, what he's done with the singles, the wrist turn like this, that's the new way to teach the hand technique for me. Between Ramon, Yoni, and Riccardo, I do feel like those three stand as the pillars of like modern hand technique right now.
Interesting. Yeah, the bar's been elevated on that. I'm just trying to play the ride cymbal with my left hand. We'll talk about Riccardo when I can do ticketing with the left hand.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that those three, just the way they've developed their techniques and what they've opened up, I do believe that those three kind of stand for me the innovators of current hand technique. And I like the influence they've had on people, guys like Ruben Spiker, others who just do fantastic things as well. But to me, those three stand as like true paragons of pushing technique and the applications of it.
Nice. Well, do you have any projects you want to shout out before?
Well, I'm teaching a drum camp with Mason Goodry, Jonathan Colin Green, and Justin in Philly, May 8th, and then I think I'm doing one. It depends on how things go, but I'm supposed to do one with Teddy Campbell and Matt Garska this summer down in Maryland. I can teach and I can practice. That's those are two of my favorite things to do, but like learning sets of music right now, it's just I don't have the brain power to do it. And I've even said that to people that it's just, it's sitting in a van or going, late night to play a gig, it's just not conducive.
Totally.
And I think that I'm gonna have to reevaluate a lot of things getting out. But the camps have always been great, and I've loved teaching at those, and I met so many wonderful people who were really supportive during this, because brain cancer is no joke.
Yeah, well, I sort of think of you as like the Goggins of drums in a way, not because you're like super hard knocks, but just because, damn, like if Alex is doing it, then what's my excuse? That's I've gotten a lot of that with this. Like, man, what are you gonna say of not practicing if a guy on max chemo dosage coming out of brain surgery is getting that? But the prognosis is good, and the doctors are like, yeah, just go on with your life after this. I'm like, all right, easier said than done, but I mean, I just don't know where life is going to go after this, and I think that's kind of the unknown, is that everything fell into chaos, and coming out of that, it's like, who do I want to be as a person? Do I want to be the same person or the same drummer, or do I want to go do something else musically? Like maybe I just want to play 2 and 4 after chemo's done. Maybe that's just, I'll put, I made my mark with the rest of the stuff, and I'll let someone else, kind of go with it. But I just don't really know, and it is very hard knocks. Again, it's one of those things where I'm sitting there with a sprained wrist and on chemo, and just with my left hand and my feet, and I'm still trying to practice. And but to me, I tell students, like, that's the kind of drive you need if you want to get through brain surgery and get through dealing with that. I mean, with chemo, I use the chemo analogy in teaching. I'm like, look, I need to see, I don't want to take 410, over 2,000 milligrams of that crap every month, but I have to live. And you have to do that type of, this unpleasant, hard practice to have a life as a musician. And I use the analogy there. But yes, I do also say, I'm like, man, I'm on chemo with brain cancer. What's your excuse? Yeah, it's amazing. Well, do you want to play something to send us out?
Absolutely.